In 1944, while pilots flew bombing missions over Germany, another war was being fought in silence, in American engineering offices. Hundreds of men, drawing boards, slide rules, coffee cups gone cold by 3 a.m. They knew something the public didn't. Germany had unleashed jet aircraft, the Arado R234, the Me-262, aircraft that flew faster than any propeller plane ever could. If America didn't catch up, and fast, the next war wouldn't be fought with bombers like the B-17. It would be fought with weapons no one had even imagined yet. Today, we rank the 5 jet bombers born from that desperate race. Aviation historians call them the class of 1945. Born on drawing boards during the war, but taking flight just as the dust settled. From the prototype that nearly killed its own ground crew, to the aircraft that literally redesigned modern aviation. These 5 planes never fought in World War II, but the brilliant, exhausted engineers who designed them, they were fighting the next war before this one was even over. Let's begin at number 5, America's very first jet bomber and the catastrophic accident that nearly ended it before it began. Number 5, the Douglas XB-43 Jetmaster, America, 1946. A strange-looking aircraft, 2 separate bubble canopies for the pilots, what people called the bug-eye cockpits. This was America's very first jet bomber to fly. But its story begins with trouble. The XB-43 was actually a conversion of a piston bomber, the Douglas XB-42 Mixmaster. The 2 piston engines were stripped out and replaced with 2 General Electric J-35 jet engines, each producing 4,000 pounds of thrust. October 1945, a routine ground engine test, suddenly, catastrophic failure. The compressor blades exploded straight through the engine casing at supersonic speed. They acted like shrapnel, slicing through the aircraft's skin, tearing into the surrounding airframe, and leaving a ground technician seriously injured. The aircraft itself was nearly destroyed where it stood. 7 months of repairs, 7 months of delay. Finally, on May 17, 1946, America's first turbojet bomber lifted off from Muroc Army Air Base, piloted by Douglas test pilot Bob Brush. But the USAAF had already moved on. The XB-43 had stability issues, and the design never entered production. The verdict from the top: we don't want 2-engine jets anymore. We want a 4-engine design. Focus shifted to the XB-45 Tornado. The XB-43's fate? Both prototypes became engine test beds, used to test the new J-47 turbojet engines, which would later power the F-86 Sabre and the B-47 itself. The XB-43 story is one of aviation's bitter truths. Sometimes being first isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be the right one. This is number 5, the pioneer that vanished into the dust of history. Number 4, the Martin XB-48, America, 1947. When you first see this aircraft, it doesn't look right. 6 engines. Yes, 6 turbojets, 3 on each wing, paired together in unusual cradles. Why? Because in 1944, jet engines were still in their infancy. Each one was weak. To haul a medium bomber off the ground, you needed a lot of them. Martin's designers made a critical decision. The XB-48 was based on the proven shape of the B-26 Marauder. But while 2 piston engines could move the Marauder, 6 jet engines were needed to do the same job. And another unusual feature: bicycle landing gear. No standard wheels under the wings. Just 2 main wheels in a single line under the fuselage, with small outriggers near the wingtips for balance. The design looked futuristic, but there was a major problem. While Martin was building the XB-48, Boeing was using captured German swept-wing research to develop something far more advanced, the B-47 Stratojet. The XB-47 outperformed every class of 45 design on paper. The XB-48 was kept alive only as a backup, in case the B-47 ran into problems. It never did. On June 22, 1947, the XB-48 made its first flight from Martin's Baltimore plant to NAS Patuxent River. But on landing, all 4 tires blew out. The pilot had braked too hard against an unfamiliar control system, An inauspicious start. Only 2 prototypes were ever built. No production order ever came. The first prototype was cannibalized in 1949, torn apart for spare parts to keep the second one flying. The second was sent to Aberdeen Proving Grounds in 1951, where it was deliberately tested to destruction. Both aircraft ended up on the scrap heap. The XB-48 story is this. Sometimes brilliant engineering loses to raw genius. 6 straight wings couldn't compete with 2 swept ones. This is number 4. Number 3, the Convair XB-46, America, 1947. And here's where things turn tragic. Because the Convair XB-46 might have been the most beautiful aircraft to come out of the entire class of 45. Look at it. That slim, graceful fuselage. Those clean, unbroken lines. A 113-foot wingspan. But so refined it looked less like a bomber and more like a flying sculpture. The specs were impressive too. Maximum speed of 545 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. A service ceiling of 40,000 feet. A range of 2,870 miles with an 8,000-pound bomb load. 4 Allison-built J-35 turbojets, each producing 4,000 pounds of thrust. April 2nd, 1947. The XB-46 made its first flight. From Convair's San Diego plant to Muroc Army Airfield, a 90-minute journey. The pilot praised its handling qualities. So what went wrong? The USAAF compared it directly to the XB-45 Tornado. The verdict was brutal. The XB-46 would likely perform worse because it was heavier than expected. And worse, its thin, graceful fuselage couldn't physically hold all the required radar equipment. There was another tragedy. Funding. 3 XB-46 prototypes had been ordered, but the budget for 2 of them was diverted to Convair's other project, the XA-44 jet attack design. Only 1 prototype was ever completed. In August 1947, the program was officially canceled, even before flight testing was finished. Why? Because it was already obsolete. Here's the heart of the story. The XB-46 was a supermodel. The B-45 Tornado was a soldier, and the Air Force needed soldiers. The lone XB-46 was used for testing and experiments, noise measurements, tail vibration studies. In 1950, it was flown to Eglin Field for cold weather testing in the climatic hangar, then scrapped. The XB-46's story is one of aviation's deepest lessons. Sometimes being beautiful isn't enough. Sometimes the most elegant solution loses to the most practical one. This is number 3, a mirror of what could have been. Number 2, the North American B-45 Tornado, America, 1947. And here, the story completely changes. The B-45 Tornado was the United States Air Force's first operational jet bomber, the world's first multi-jet bomber to be refueled in mid-air, and NATO's first jet bomber when the alliance was formed in 1949. It entered service on April 22, 1948, but early operations were plagued by problems, especially with engine reliability. For 2 years, it looked like the B-45 might fade into history alongside its failed siblings. Then came June 1950, Korea. In the Korean War, the B-45 finally proved its value, performing both conventional bombing and aerial reconnaissance missions. It became one of the most important assets in the entire theater. December 4th, 1950, a pivotal moment in aviation history. The first time ever that a jet bomber was shot down by a jet fighter, when a B-45 was downed by a Soviet-built MiG-15 inside Chinese airspace. It was a tragic milestone, and it marked the true beginning of the jet age in combat. But the real story was still to come. In the early 1950s, 40 B-45s were extensively modified to carry nuclear weapons. Their defensive systems were upgraded. Fuel tankage was expanded for greater range and survivability. The program was called Operation Fandango, also known as Operation Backbreaker. The wing spars were modified to accommodate 3 different types of nuclear bombs, extra fuel tanks, electronic support equipment, and a remotely operated tail turret. The B-45 became a critical part of America's defense strategy, performing the nuclear deterrence mission throughout the early 1950s, when the Cold War threatened to turn hot at any moment. And there was a classified secret. ARB-45Cs stationed in England were painted in RAF markings and flown by RAF crews, performing clandestine reconnaissance missions over the Soviet Union under Operation Jiu-Jitsu. The reason was simple. USAF crews were not officially permitted to fly into Soviet airspace. The RAF had no such restrictions. A total of 143 B-45s were built between 1947 and 1950. Eventually, the more capable Boeing B-47 Stratojet replaced it, but the B-45 served in Strategic Air Command from 1950 until 1959, almost a decade of frontline service. The B-45 Tornado was number 2, not because it was the most advanced, because it actually worked. It was America's first nuclear-armed jet bomber. It was the early instrument of the Cold War, and when execution matters more than innovation, the B-45 wins. And number 1, the Boeing B-47 Stratojet. America, 1947. To understand this aircraft, you need to understand one thing. The B-47 literally redefined the future of aviation, and it almost didn't happen. May 1945. Germany has just surrendered. A 32-year-old American aerodynamicist named George Scherer, Boeing's chief aerodynamicist, on loan to the U.S. Army Air Forces, is part of a scientific team led by Theodor von Kerm. Their mission: scour captured German research facilities for technology that might shape the future. At the Wilkenrode Research Center near Braunschweig, Scherer found something extraordinary: wind tunnel data on swept-back wings. The Germans had discovered that angling a wing backward by 29 degrees, then 35, dramatically reduced drag at high speeds. An aircraft with swept wings could approach the speed of sound. An aircraft with straight wings could not. What Scherer did next changed aviation forever. On May 10, 1945, sitting in occupied Germany, Scherer wrote a 7-page letter, in his own cramped handwriting, to his Boeing colleague Bob Withington. It contained a drawing of a swept wing and the key mathematical formulas. To make sure military censors didn't delay it, Scherer wrote the word censored on the envelope himself and dropped it in the mail. That single letter is now considered a landmark of the entire jet age. When Scherer returned to Seattle, he led the effort to completely overhaul Boeing's existing B-47 design. The straight-winged Model 432 was abandoned. In its place, a radical 35-degree swept wing, with engines hanging in pods beneath, not buried in the fuselage. Other American companies were given the same German research. Only Boeing acted on it. September 12, 1947. The first XB-47 rolled out. Just 6 days later, the USAF became a separate service, the United States Air Force. December 17, 1947, the 44th anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight. The XB-47 took to the air, from Boeing Field in Seattle to Moses Lake Airfield, lasting 27 minutes, and the world changed. The XB-47 looked like nothing else flying. Aviation historians later described it as a sleek, beautiful outcome that was highly advanced, looking like it had flown in from a future that didn't exist yet. September 3, 1948, a formal contract was signed for 10 B-47A bombers. Eventually, 2,042 B-47s were built to meet the urgent demands of Cold War tensions. It entered operational service in 1951 and quickly became the backbone of Strategic Air Command by the late 1950s. It served as a strategic bomber until 1965, when it was finally replaced by Boeing's own B-52 Stratofortress. But the real legacy is this: the B-47 swept wing design became the Dina of every modern jet. The Boeing 707, the 737, the 747, every commercial airliner you've ever boarded in your life, its design philosophy traces directly back to George Scherer's 7-page letter from a defeated Germany. The B-47 was not just a bomber. It was the future of aviation itself. It was the aircraft that delivered the jet age to the entire world. The B-47 Stratojet is number 1 because it wasn't designed for one war. It was the beginning of humanity's onward flight. Conceived in World War II, perfected in the Cold War, and its technology still lives on today in every commercial flight you take. This is the greatest WW2-era American jet bomber, without question. So that's our ranking. From the forgotten first flight of the XB-43 to the world-changing innovation of the B-47. These 5 aircraft never fought in World War II, but their minds, their engineering, their design philosophies were born in WW2. They were the bridge that connected the piston age to the jet age. And the real lesson? Innovation never arrives on time. It comes early, or it comes late. But the one who does the real work, their story is always written eventually. What's your favorite jet bomber? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe. The next one is already in production. Thank you for watching.